It's me, it's one of the old Paul friends welcoming you to Starfleet Universe On Call. And tonight we've got Barry, we've got Dave, and that's it at the moment. The plan is to actually talk to the one, the only Barry Kirk about his opinions on the Carnivons, his take on them, and see what he thinks of them when it comes to the weapons, the ships, and all that. So, let's say hello to Barry. Hey, how you doing, Barry?
Hey there. It's been a day. That's for sure. Yeah. So, any case, looking at the Carnivons, they have an interesting array of weapons.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
It's sad that it's a conjectural race.
Well, okay. My understanding is that they're not really conjectural race. They're conjectural in that later on, after the early years, they're conjectural. But, in the early years, before they were basically genocide occurred and they were all killed. Oh, and they were wiped out. Yep. Which I agree that it would have been nice to have them as part of the general war, in those efforts. Now, as was
right.
An idea that had occurred, of course, is that there is the possibility, as far out as it could possibly be, and that is that some Carnivons actually escaped the total genocide and, ran off to some corner of the galaxy, which, they no one was going to go going after them, So, in theory, they could be brought back.
Right. Oh, yeah.
But until that moment in time, they're still conjectural when it comes to past the early years. Yes.
Yeah. So, obviously, the normal thing I think of is what would make a good tournament cruiser for them.
Right.
And so I was looking at their heavy cruiser,
mm-hmm.
and it's rated 130 BTVs.
That sounds about right.
And although with a plus refit, that bumps it up to 133 to 175 refit, bumps it up to 135, and I think the 175 refit gives it size 6 drone racks and or death bolt racks.
Yeah, death bolt racks. Yeah.
So let's look at their weapons. The disruptor cannon is kind of interesting. This ship is not. It's not a. It plays more like a set, I guess, in that it's a 2-turn arming weapon, direct fire weapon.
Oh, agreed. But there's two differences. Obviously, the disruptor cannon, when it comes to normal standard loads, it is a rolling delay.
Right.
And of course, then there's the to hit. It's a heck of a lot better to hit than a photon. And
oh yeah,
in fact,
absolutely.
Let me double check. I could sworn. Let me just double check on the overload energy. The overloaded energy requires warp, but the regular loading energy does not require warp. It can be from any source.
Correct.
Which makes it, again, better than the Fed in that regard. Obviously, the great thing about the Fed is that if you have a standard photon, that you can hold it for 1 point of energy.
Right. Yeah. So, but it is more accurate than a photon.
Right.
Yeah. But I guess, yeah.
Right, and okay, that's what I thought. Okay, I wanted to double check on this, which is that it costs less energy overall to load an overloaded disruptor cannon, because it's two in the first turn, and then at least two warp in the second turn. Now, of course, that does give it a big issue, because it's the same issue that the Fed has when it comes to having fully overloaded photons, charging fully overloaded photons, which is that 6 points to overload all of the disruptor cannons at 16 points of power in one turn.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is, would you ever in my mind, it'd be rare that you actually would do that. Just because of the cost.
Yeah. Right. But you can overload on with reserve power.
Right.
And you have enough overload. You have enough batteries to overload two of them on reserve power. But I'd say the disruptor cannon kind of is right there in the photon disruptor range.
Oh, agreed. Because, with overload, you almost can get to be as powerful as a photon.
But
the standard,
total energy.
right? And the standard is like an overloaded disruptor.
Or standard photon. The same cost and energy as a standard photon.
Right, but it's worse at range 5 to 8. It's only 6 points. Only 6 points of damage, but better at range 1, which is 10 points of damage.
Right.
So
but at 9 to 15, it is much more. It's more accurate than the photon.
Right, and actually can do more damage too. The 9 to 15.
Well, photon does 8 points of damage.
No, yes, it does, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, but to hit,
it's more accurate than photon.
Right.
It's the photon at 9 to 15. 9 to 12, its damage, its hit number is 1 to 2. Mm-hmm. This is double that. It's 75% as much damage. And then at 13 to 15, the photon hits on a 1, and this guy hits on a 1 to 4, so it's 4 times more likely to hit at the photon.
Yeah, so it's going to do a heck of a lot more damage at the longer ranges.
Yeah. It's a little bit light in terms of phasers.
Agreed there.
For the heavy cruiser, 4P1, 4P1s and 5P3s. But then it has the heel nippers, which are very interesting.
Agreed.
And it has the death bolts. And the death bolts are
they're interesting.
killer to ban.
Now, which one do you want to talk about first? The death bolts or the heel nippers?
The heel nippers.
Okay.
So the heel nippers, there's two ways you can use the heel nipper. You can use it as an anti-drone, and it's very effective in that role. Because it fires, how often does it fire? It fires every 8 impulses. I know it fires 4 times per turn.
Well, okay.
Against sucks.
Right, against shuttles and drones. The size guys 6 or smaller. And you can fire once a turn against a normal ship.
Right. But against the size 6, and that's something that let's see,
costs 1 point of warp power to charge it. You can fire it each
or quarter
point of power for
smaller.
for firing against the smallest targets. Yes, which is interesting.
Yeah, quarter point against.
Because of, if you look at the way it damages, it is most part basically it's definitely good against drones. In that a speed 20 drone,
oh yeah,
it can destroy a speed 20 drone, a type 1 speed 20 drone if it hits. Because the additional damage is based on the speed of the drone.
Right.
Yep. You get if you hit, you get 1 point of damage. And then you get additional 3 points of damage above
so every above speed 12.
Right, speed 12. And I said, okay, yeah.
Yeah. How often can it fire against the smaller targets?
It can fire up to 4 times in one turn.
But is that 4? Okay, but is there a delay between those firings?
That's the one thing I have to double check on. Bum, bum, bum. Where is it? Okay, energy. Okay. Given the heel nipper cannot fire more than 4 shots in a given turn, nor can it fire more than 4 shots in a given quarter turn period. So basically, there is no delay between the shots, looks like.
Right. So is that 4 shots in an impulse, or is that 4 shots, 1 per impulse?
That's the one question. I was just thinking about that myself, and it's like, okay, I don't see that mentioned at the moment. My assumption is that you can fire them all in the same impulse if you want to, because there's nothing at.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because I don't see anything. Yep. I don't see anything here which mentions that it can't fire them all within the same impulse.
Impulse.
Yeah.
Right.
It just says it can't fire more than 4 times within a quarter turn.
Right. So it's death against shuttles and drones.
Mm-hmm. Fighters, obviously.
And the best part, and fighters, yeah. And the best part is that against drones, even if it doesn't kill it instantly, it causes it to lose a turn of movement or a movement.
Right.
So, against the suicide shuttle, which might survive it, if you hit that suicide shuttle, that may be enough to prevent it from hitting.
Yep. And then, of course, the interesting weapon. One of those things that's interesting about this weapon is that it basically the shields have no effect. Period.
Right.
When it hits,
yeah, and it does warp damage, which is.
Yep, it's specific damage.
The amount of damage it does is actually pretty minimal. What's that?
Yeah, the specific, it's specific damage to a specific system. And
yes, but
I forget.
The more important thing is that it can affect somebody's movement.
Right. Yeah, you get to target whether you hit the right or left warp.
Center or right warp.
Yep.
Yeah. And it causes them to turn, lose a movement, and reset their turn and split modes to 0.
Talk about screwing up your opponent.
That's what it does.
Yep. Oh.
It screws up your opponent.
If they lose that movement and they get turned.
And they get turned.
Yep.
And you get to pick which direction they turn. Which can really, really make a huge difference. Like you're planning this whole thing and then whoops. You just lost all maneuverability.
Okay, yeah. And I was just double checking on this, which is that if you fire a heel nipper at a engine which is completely destroyed, it doesn't do the damage to the engine, but it still has the effect of the turning.
Yeah. It causes them to lose a movement. So let's say you're going up against somebody with a down shield. Or let's say they have weapons that, okay, you've got death bolts coming in, and they're going to fire weapons at this death bolt. And oops, you turn them, and their defensive weapons are out of arc. Oh, well.
Yep. Yep, and can you...
That's heel nipper.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if you got...
heel nipper.
Yeah. Can you imagine if you had a Carnivon chasing you and he's like a little bit off to the right or a little off to the left? Fire, he fires the heel nipper, requires you to turn basically into him, and then you get to fire possibly on a down shield.
Yeah. Or if you're riding right up against the wall of the map and he turns you into the wall.
Mm-hmm. And then of course there's the possibility, if you time it right, which is have it so it turns into death bolt which you're sending its way.
Yeah.
So, I definitely, it's a really cool weapon. Now, here's the issue that obviously that the Carnivons have, which is you have basically two weapons that require warp. The disruptor cannons are arguably, require warp or not.
Well, yes and no. I mean, the disruptor cannon only if you overload it. Doesn't require warp.
That's why I say, arguably.
And the heel nipper really only requires 1 point of warp to operate it. 2 if you're using it at extended ranges.
Right.
Or, well, I guess you're most likely going to use 2 power. If you're using it against for defense in defensive anti-drone mode, you're only going to use a 1/4 point of power per shot. So,
right.
And if you're using it up against the ship, you're most likely going to use 2 points of power just because it's more accurate. You're probably not going to be firing it at longer ranges unless it's a desperation move.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the death bolt, that's an interesting weapon.
Yeah.
Because it's got so many fiddly bits to it. It starts off, you can fire, unlike, and of course, you remember the tachyon missiles, and we had all these. I think the death bolts blow away the tachyon missiles in terms of capability and flexibility.
Oh, yeah. But
that is ultimate drone.
Oh, yeah. But here's the one issue with that is that you start with a standard death bolt. Now, to tweak that death bolt, which you can do in the middle of a scenario, you can tweak it, which is awesome. Because it allows you to, depending upon the situation, at that point in the battle, you can tweak it to be one way or the other. Problem, but it
requires deck crew actions.
Yep, requires 1 deck crew action. And deck crew action takes 32 impulses.
32
impulses. For 1 deck crew action. So to customize it, after you load it, then you have to have another deck crew action to actually tweak it. So you might not be able to fire a death bolt, only every other turn if you want to tweak them, even a little bit.
Well, it's even worse than that because it's basically a 32 impulse delay.
Yeah.
You launch one, but it takes.
Speak with the host.
I'm back.
Recording started.
I'm back.
Oh, okay.
Got kicked
for
off.
a while there, you went away.
Yeah, I got kicked off. Skype went freaking nuts and it kicked me off.
Oh, okay. So I don't know where I was talking, and all of a sudden I realized I wasn't hearing anything.
Yeah, we were talking about death bolts. Last thing that I said was that 32 requires a deck crew action, and therefore you were also mentioning that basically gives a 32 impulse delay in firing between launches.
Yeah. Right. So for tournament cruisers, I guess we would probably use the 20 speed variant.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. All right. So they start off doing 30 points of damage and taking 10 points of damage to destroy. And they can survive hit from an ADD.
Wow.
So, yeah. Not necessarily. Says, I think, let's see. And then, if you want, then there's, the 5 different things you can do is that each one of them reduces its damage. Is you can put in anti-tractor, you can have it hit at range for reduced effect and a chance to miss. You can put ECM on it.
Yep.
You can give it some armor.
Mm-hmm.
You can. Now here's one that I like. You can put anti-drones on the damn thing.
Yep. It's called a Spitfire.
So that it shoots down other drones. Yeah. Now, isn't that something I've been saying that the Tachyon missile should have that capability or something similar?
Mm-hmm. But at the same time, with Tachyon missiles, the question is, how many of the other Omega empires have that many missiles systems?
Drones.
You know, I call them missiles because none of them really had drones.
Yeah. Right. Well, the FRA has drones. And let's see who else. There's missile weapons.
Yeah, but the question is, okay, well, again, Barry, the question is, even with the FRA, they have drones. Okay, big surprise. But what is it? What is it? I mean, true. What is was the big thing with the Alpha Octant when it comes to drones? And that is those launch platforms, i.e., like fighters.
Mm-hmm.
Did the FRA actually ever have fighters?
Yeah.
Right. How many carriers did it create? You know?
Yeah. Although, to tell you, yeah.
Because my understanding is the FRA was a relatively small empire in all of the Omega Octant. You know?
Right, right.
So, you know...
the block still had Tachyon missiles. And you could have civil wars. The Mazarons had a lot of civil wars, so...
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Yeah, I know what you're saying, but in any case, Carnivons have
Carnivons. Yes. Yeah. Well, the Carnivons.
Yeah.
They were. What was their enemy? The Zinnies. You know.
Who were they up against? The Zinnies? Yeah.
The Zinni, yeah. That was their natural enemies.
Yeah. Right. And then the Death Bolts would be, if you put the Spitfire option on there, the Death Bolts and the Heel Nippers made a superb anti-drone weapon.
Yeah. Agreed.
Although the Heel Nippers might have been the better one of the two. Simply because it didn't take ammo. And for 1 point of power, you can basically stop 4 drones.
Mm-hmm.
That's death against high-speed drones. 17. You got a 32-speed drone, a Heel Nipper will take out even a large drone. Yeah.
The Lyrans and the Zinnies hated the Carnivons on site in their first contact in Y55, more so even that they hated each other. The Carnivons attacked both feline empires in Y56, as both lay exhausted from the first Lyran-Zinni war, drove wedge between the two, reaching the wind cluster in Y65. What followed was a period of near peace as the Lyrans were busy fighting the Hydrants and the Zinni were preoccupied with the Klingons. The Carnivons were content to hold the territory they had, and the feline empires grudgingly left them alone. But in Y106, the Zinnis launched a new war against the Carnivons, cleverly destroying one horde at a time. Knowing no other horde would come to their aid, Lyrans quickly followed suit. And only a few years the war was over, Lyrans and Zinnis could find no more Carnivons to kill, but could not tell if they had destroyed all the planets or not. So, historically, two Carnivon hordes on the eastern end of the Carnivon territory were being attacked. One of the Zinnis and one by the Lyrans. Two briefly allied attempt to survive, but were finally overwhelmed. The last of their ships dove into the reactive walls of the Wind Star Cluster, denying the Finland's last chance to kill them. The Wind later found the wreckage of the Carnivon ships on one of the planets, but no survivors.
Yeah. So here's an interesting one. Those Spitfire test bolts.
Right.
Other than reducing the damage of the death bolt by up to 6 points of damage. So you go from a 30-point warhead to a 24-point warhead, but now you have 6 anti-drones.
Right.
So it does 6 anti-drones, and then it still has the base drone to hit something.
Mm-hmm.
That's freaking awesome.
Oh.
You can use that against fighters. You can use that against drones. That is awesome. That's probably the most commonly, I would imagine that would be the most commonly used variant of the death bolt.
It wouldn't surprise me. Now, did you see how the death bolt does damage?
Well, if in its base mode, it just does 30 points of damage if it hits, and it takes 10 to kill it.
Yeah, and the one thing you're missing is that when you launch the death bolt, you define an either leading, normal, or follow tracking. So
you can have some adjustment on the shield that it hits on. Yeah.
Yep. So even if, let's say, it quote unquote strikes shield number 4, it might not actually hit shield number 4. If it's a lead targeting, it's going to hit shield number 3 or shield number 5. So to me, that leads.
And that can be further adjusted with the heel ripper.
Yep. So to me, that makes it quite interesting. It makes it when it comes to that death bolt hitting at all, you're almost rolling the dice to a certain degree because you don't know exactly what shield it's going to hit. Which tracking is it? What kind of tracking is it specified on launch? You don't know. And actually, it's one thing I did not actually check, which is, I'm not sure if that's revealed when you identify the death bolt. That's one thing I did not look up.
Oh, let me take a look.
I don't see. Because obviously it has to tell the target, but I'm not sure it has to tell the tracking. I don't see anything mentioned.
Right. Huh.
Yeah, destination's made in secret. Yeah. Okay, I don't see anything about it when it comes to death ball specified in the death ball targeting section.
Right. It doesn't say that.
So my guess is that you don't have to announce it, even if the opponent labs it.
Right. Wow, that's huge.
Yep.
Wait, because let's see.
Funny part of this, I'd have to double check on this when it comes to the Quarry and the Scud missiles that the Quarry had.
Right.
And I think they were supposed to be really slow, really slow, but do a lot of damage. And my guess is that these probably are much better missiles than the Scuds ever were. It's been a while since I looked at the Module C4 race Empires. Sorry, Gene.
Right. Yeah, death bolts are interesting. They're much more flexible and usable than drone racks.
Yes, but as pointed out, there is that delay, especially when you want to customize.
That's true.
So,
but this whole ship is based on two-turn army.
Mm-hmm.
And with the heel nippers, you can get in close, turn your opponent, and then run away, and he may not be able to chase you if you turn him the correct direction and then reset his turn mode.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes it much easier for a two-turn arming ship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, one thing I was thinking about when it comes to a tournament cruiser is I think it might have been better to use the command cruiser.
Mm-hmm. The command cruiser.
Yeah, it gives it.
Okay, now that one has the phaser 2s.
Yeah. Rear extended. So that'll help with that. Now, obviously,
and it has 2x.
Right. And 2 extra what?
Is that command cruiser a little bit overkill?
Nah, I don't think so.
Okay.
Well, to me, here's
two
what
extra APRs.
Right. Here's the one thing that reason why I say that is the amount of power that's on it.
Gets you 2 more power.
It's got what? 37 power total.
39
Oh, there's the two APR
on the command cruiser and 39 on the. What's that?
Yeah, I just noticed the extra 2. So it's 37 on the heavy cruiser, 39 on the command cruiser.
Okay.
I'm not. Originally, I was going to suggest also converting the APRs to AWRs, but with 39 power, I'm less likely to say that at this moment in time for a tournament cruiser.
Right.
Because as is, it's not like the disruptor cannons require 4 points of warp power. Only requires 2 points of warp power per.
Mm-hmm.
So That's
Right.
doable. And you only have a maximum of 2 additional warp power cost when it comes to heel nippers.
Yeah.
Now, one thing I don't think they do. I forgot to check about the heel nippers, which is whether you can hold them.
Heel nippers? No, I don't think you can.
Nope. I'm just looking at the weapon status. It just says heel nippers are now multi-turn weapon and cannot hold energy from the previous turn. Whoa, which to me means that if you charge it and you don't use up all the energy, you have to announce a discharge. Would be my guess when it comes to heel nippers.
Armed heel nippers cannot be held and fired on a later turn. If the heel nipper is not fired on the turn it is armed, it is automatically discharged at the end of the turn.
Bingo.
Energy applied to it is lost and cannot be regained. Discharge does not constitute firing the weapon, does not delay the firing weapon.
Right.
Okay, but you can check that.
Right, but basically you have to announce that you discharge it.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you have to announce how much energy you discharge, but you have to definitely announce a discharge. I'd have to double check on E1.24 because it's possible in E1.24 it actually says, you have to announce how much energy you're discharging. I'm just curious about that really quick. Oops. These. E.24 discharge. Okay. Right. The act is conducted. The final phase, the amount of energy discharged from each weapon is known unless otherwise defined. So the amount of energy discharged has to be announced.
Okay. Yeah. I'm starting to fall asleep here, and I have an early wake up.
Okay. Then I will let you go then.
Okay.
Okay. Well, you have a good night.
All right. Hopefully I'll see you next week.
Yep. Same here.
Yeah. All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay. Well, we got to hear Barry's take on the Carnivons. I will actually continue the podcast. I got another topic I'm going to bring up real quick, actually. And it is actually big surprise. The Andromedan. Now, there is a discussion on the discussion board. So if you really if you're really interested in it, it might be a good topic to go and seek out. It's under the proposed ship changes when it comes to the tournament zone. Now, currently it seems like there's been an agreement that at the very least that the Andromedan needs an additional TRL. Honestly, I think it needs 2 TRHs, and one thing that Brian Evans was pointing out, and that his recollection of the 3 TRL is that power was a huge issue, and that's one thing I totally forgot about. Actually, in my mind, the problem is that with 3 TRLs, now you have, instead of 4 points of power towards your TRs, you got 6 points of power. There's 2 additional points of power. So, the Andromedan might need more power. And I never thought about that, but I have to agree because currently, here's the thing. I've flown the Andromedan. When it comes to energy, right now, the energy is good for the weapons that it has. It has 2 TRLs. Given the 2 TRLs, it's got enough power to energize them. Yes, it can't do that and keep running around the board without causing issues because, big surprise, the Andromedan is always using battery power. When you do that, and Lord knows I know, if you want to try to keep up your speed, you're going to be using battery power no matter what with the current one. So, to me, what that tells me is that the Andromedan currently, when it comes to power to weapons ratio, is dead on. Now, given that fact, I think I disagree with it. The 3 TRLs is the way to go. I truly believe that's 2 TRHs, and we need at the very least 2 more points of power to offset that. Now, yeah, at least 2 more points of power on that because of you as an Andromedan. I feel like because it's a 2 turn-on weapon, you need the ability to go through another person's shield. You have to have the ability because the Fed, the Klingon, even the Klingon, let's say the Klingon at range 8, that's 24 points of damage at range 8. Plus phasers, so you might get up like 33 points of damage. At range 8, the Andromedan is lucky, and I do mean very, very freaking lucky, if it gets round 15 at range 8. At range 0. At that point, then if you center line it perfectly, then you can get a maximum at the moment of, a maximum 36 plus 20 is 56 points of damage. That's if you range 0. Range 0. That means the phaser 2s do their maximum points of damage, which is 6 points of damage. But you have to be at range 0. Can you imagine trying to get a Klingon at range 0? Or even a Lyran at range 0? Or even a Zinni at range 0? Can you imagine being at range 0? You've got, let's say for the Zinni. Let's say, well, Zinni has this phaser 3s, can be really nasty. It fires, for Zinni, it fires 6 phaser 3s, it fires 4 overloaded photons, and it will then actually overload, and then you got so maximum of 40 points of damage for the disruptors. The phasers, I think they max out at 8. No, not. I'm pretty sure it's 9 points of damage per phaser. Let's say just 4. That's 36 points of power. That's 76. Then you got another, let's say 4 to 6 phaser 3s. Let's just give them 4. Let's be lenient. Let's say 4. 4 phaser 3s will give you another 16 points. So that's over 90 points of power, 90 points of damage. And that basically, then the Andromedan's dead. I'm sorry. The current one is just way, way too. The amount of weapon it needs is a lot more. I think defensively, it's good. I would like to have it. If we really wanted to start tweaking it, as I pointed out before, I think that the way to tweak it would be to actually going and have it down to 2 batteries, but then add an energy module into the hanger and do it that way. If you really want to go crazy with trying to tweak the Andromedan to be as even-handed as possible, I think that would be the way to go. Now, I think we can create a Andromedan that's competitive without trying to introduce a system which can actually cause some issues, when it comes to balance. That's the possibility of there might be some balance issues versus the a simple solution. Go from 2 TRLs to 2 TRHs plus 2 power. And I think you have the best way of going. So with that, I think we'll wrap this up for this evening. Barry had a wonderful, got to hear Barry's take on the Carnivons. Obviously, he really thought that it had some interesting weapon systems, especially when it comes to the heel nipper and the death bolts. Obviously, we both see the issue with the death bolts. That is, the death bolts have the issue with when you want to have those custom death bolts. Unlike the drones, where you have to preset them up, but there's no delay. With the death bolts, with every tweak you do, because in theory, no one says you can only have one tweak. You can have multiple tweaks. It just means that it takes longer and longer and longer and longer to actually tweak that death bolt. Now, in a tournament situation, the question would be, of course, would you allow those players for the first load to have tweaked, as many tweaks as they want to their death bolts? I don't know. You just have to wait and see. So, with that, I am Paul Franz, and I bid you a good night.